G'day folks, talk to Dr Sharon Zivkovic about all things autism, levels and traits, monotropism, co-occurring conditions, body mechanics and flow state, neurodiversity, what's politically correct, has self been on the spectrum, and she's also an NDIS participant. What works about the scheme? What doesn't? It's really interesting seeing her perspective with lived experience of disability. And a professional in this space, master of autism. Love the yarn. Keep up the good work, Doctor. And if you like the podcast, hit that subscribe or follow button. And we've also got a Patreon page. The link is within the description. So if you want to roll with the squad and become a patron, that'd be great. And want to thank our sponsors, Permobil Australia, the greatest electric wheelchairs in the land. Wouldn't be sitting in anything else but these 4 wheels right here, and they've got great assistive tech also. So righto, let's get into it. Dr Sharon Zivkovic. Did I pronounce that right, Doctor?
Yeah, you did really well. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. So I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and willing to have a chat about the importance around the work that you're doing, and when it's got to do with a lot of people and mob out there that are on the spectrum when we're talking about autism, neurodiversity.
Cool. Yeah, we're looking forward to our chat.
Awesome. And do I call you Doctor, Sharon, Dr Zivkovic? What do we go by?
We go by Sharon.
Righto, just want to double check, that's all. So have you always been from down South Australia, SA way?
Oh, just about. I mean, I was less than a 10-pound pom. I was hanging on to a 10-pound pom. So I was like 2 years old, coming on the boat from England with all the other English people in the 60s sort of thing. So yeah, so I was 2 years in the UK, but yeah, the rest of the time, and always out north of Adelaide. So yeah, I haven't been able to move from where I landed. I kind of like, yes, it might be an autism thing, but I like everything staying the same.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that, but and it's a beautiful place too when you're talking about South Australia, and just if it's the city itself with Adelaide and when you're looking at the regional areas, and I've been up in Coober Pedy there too, so that's it's pretty interesting, that part of South Australia, when you got people living out of literally carved out of the mountainside, like a lot of these houses and hotels. It's pretty wild, and sandstorms and all sorts of stuff. So
yeah, I must admit, like as an autistic person, I stay very close to home. I don't, like, I'm either overseas in a foreign country or home. Like it's there's very little in between, which is which is like it's either a big out or home sort of thing. So I love home. I could COVID. I loved COVID. I loved. I love this, being able to stay home and it not being seen as antisocial, and being able to get everything delivered, and it was just amazing. Like everyone was working from home. Like it wasn't something that was unusual. It was for I think for a lot of people with disabilities, there was a part of COVID that was quite interesting for us.
Yeah, that's it, and benefits too. So. Yeah, and it was for myself as well. Like, I'm a C5, C6 quadriplegic, but just certain things that I could do, like, and obviously couldn't travel. So when it comes to meetings and stuff like that, because I was flying here, there, and everywhere, and so then it was great when we're tapping in through certain software, like what we're doing now. So then it's having it, whether that's podcast and having a general meeting with, if it's, public and private entities or whatever it may be. So, so you can make sure that productivity is still at a high, but it's just a different interface, hey?
Yeah, and it just saves so much time, So for autistic people, there's they talk about spoon theory with regards to you've got so many spoons in a day, and all that travelling takes up those spoons. So if you can reduce, if you can reduce having to have that kind of sensitivity to the world through all the travel, just so much more productive. And I think the more I've realised that, the more I have stayed home, because I know there's a cost involved with regards to my productivity by being out and about. And so I just get so much, I'm capable of producing so much more if I don't put myself through that.
Here. Because I used to, I was travelling to Sydney because I'm up on the Central Coast, New South Wales, and travelling to Sydney for, I don't know, like 15, 16 years or whatever. And, you're looking at 4 hours of travel a day. So, and you're losing a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all right if you're, on the train or where you're not driving, and if you got access to a laptop or tablet and you can tap away and do some stuff like work-wise if need be, but it's just a lot of lost time. And when you're talking about 4 hours, you can slam in a bit of work within that amount of time. So I'm pretty thankful that my office now is just 10 minutes up the road. It's been doing it for a while, but it still seems foreign to me because I've just travel to work for so many years, but I still got to go to Sydney and other parts of Australia, but that's all good. But going into some of the mastery over the years, building your craft, right?
Yep.
Important. And when you're looking at the hub that you were developing your skills, you're looking at the University of South Australia. So that's a bit of a solid hub there, and it sounds like a good place where you've really learnt, enjoyed, mastered your craft because you spent a bit of time there, hey?
I've been like currently my adjunct position in Australia is with Torrens University Australia. So I spent time with University of South Australia. I think I was teaching it for University of Adelaide for 16 years, which was, quite a big spell. So I've kind of like, I kind of like move around the university sector depending, I guess, on, they're all so different, and they've all got different cultures, and they've got, the people I'm hanging with in different universities have got different interest areas. So I'm not locked into like one field. I'm kind of like I just move around with regards to my knowledge and interest and what I'm working on at the time. And I would say currently, I've got a really good fit with Torrens University Australia, and I think that's because they've got a focus on entrepreneurship, but they've also got a focus on systems and complexity. So that's a really good fit for where I am now, and I think because they're quite young, they're quite willing to look at new things. So I like people who like looking at new things as well. So that's kind of like where I'm kind of like positioned right now. But I've got a couple of enterprises happening. I've got the university position. I'm studying again, which is like crazy. This is university qualification number 7.
I was going to say, because I've seen your qualifications and the bloody list, and now you're still going. It never stops, eh?
But the crazy thing is, I left school at 14. I stopped going regularly by the end of primary, and spent like 15, 16 years on welfare. So I didn't go back to school till quite late. But then working out what I had to do, I never really thought, I never gave much thought to it. But when I went back to school, which was many years ago now, like it was in my late 20s, the only way I could do it, and I went back to high school. I went back to the same high school that my parents were asked to sign me out of. But I went back and I snuck a tape recorder in so I could, because the thing is I've got very, my processing's quite slow.
Yeah, and do you want to, like, that's the thing, because you've touched on it, right? So when you're talking about yourself and autism, and we'll go a bit deeper in that a little bit later when we're talking about the levels, but so where do you fit when I know it's really hard when it's got to do with autism, and you can't just place someone in a box, right? But sort of where do you float on the spectrum and what level?
It's kind of like changed a bit. They don't so much speak about high and low functioning anymore, because you can be quite what used to be thought of as high functioning, but have really off days where you're really low functioning, and then also the low functioning kind of like puts a barrier on people's abilities, and so there isn't so much of the high and low functioning. What they do now with the assessment is there's these levels with regards to your support needs. So like how much support do you need? And I'm a level 2, which is quite high support needs. So there's some things I find really difficult, which I find quite amusing these days. So I can't drive a car. I don't operate a stove. I've set the house on fire and I've gassed a couple of times. Right? So I cook with like little appliances when I cook sort of stuff. But I've got to remember I walk off and leave things. You know what I mean, sort of stuff. Because I'm like around 60% of autistic people also have ADHD, and so I'm an autistic ADHD person as well. So there's things I have difficulty with. But there's things that I'm just amazing at. And so for autistic people,
academics is bloody one of them. Hey?
If I do it my way, you know what I mean? But how the school system and everything's set up, like I spend most of my time taking what comes out of the education system and having to put it into a way that it will go into my brain because I'm autistic.
And how did that go? If we go back to, so left at school at 14, you've gone back to uni later on in life, right? And which is awesome, like, because if you're looking at the list of what you've obtained over the years, which is very impressive. So how was it for you, the whole process of study and learning, and how did your fellow students or the teachers take you on board with your disability when it's got to do with acceptance, inclusion, and was it a bit difficult when you were trying to study in your own way, in your own capacity? Take us through that journey.
I never let anyone know about it's only been in the recent years that I've really let people know that I've got a disability. So, the one thing a lot of autistic people do is, especially women, is they mask it. So they hide it. So people wouldn't know that I had a tape recorder in my bag and I was taping all the lessons and having to come home every night and spend all my evenings transcribing all of that. And trying to get, my daughter remembers seeing pieces of paper all over the walls where I was trying to get that into my head. So, I wasn't officially diagnosed as autistic. It wasn't something in the 60s that you would have, because back then it was classed as childhood schizophrenia, and it was the mother's fault, like the whole autism was the fault of the mothers, because they called it refrigerator mother syndrome. So the mothers didn't give you enough love, and that's what caused autism, sort of stuff. So I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful that I wasn't diagnosed as a child. I was just a difficult kid. So that's what it was like. The study bit. I just knew what I had to do to make the knowledge get into my head. It wasn't something that I would have sat down with a school and discussed back in those days. So when that would have been, it would have been the early 80s. I wouldn't have kind of like said to anybody, hey, like everything you were saying, I'm not hearing at all, and I'm just sitting here with a smile on my face, and I'm going home at night time and transcribing it and trying to work out what that all was about. So yeah, never admitted to it at all. Now that I've come out as an autistic and I'm studying as an autistic person, I do get a bit pissed off, I guess, that I do have to go through this process to learn. And I think that's because I know there's so many other autistic people out there that are unable to fit into, that haven't worked out like their way of thinking, and that it's not them that's unable, it's the way that the school system is not suiting their way of thinking. And so I do, these days I do get a bit peeved with the fact of, like if you put in for, if you say like, you go to the office and you want the disability support sort of thing. It's like you get a week extra for your assignments, but that's nothing. I'm always in a couple of weeks beforehand. There's a whole lot of other stuff going on, which to have courses that were designed for people that think like I think would be great.
And so how's that in the capacity that you're in now, like working at the university? So is it putting on like what you go through and what you know about people with autism on how that certain, if it's policies or if it's got to do with disability inclusion acts or whatever it may be within the university itself, just so this helps the next generation of youngsters and adults that are coming through universities to know, if someone does need to learn a certain way, they might not be able to cram that in a week, like you said, because there's certain systems that they're internally going through, and it might take an extra week. So is that what you get involved in now?
I would say what I'm starting to get involved in now is I'm developing a program to teach business advisors how to support autistic entrepreneurs. And so I guess all autistic people are different. So it's there is some things that we've got in common. So one of them is very bottom up thinking and associative thinking. So lots of data from our interest areas and seeing patterns in that, either visually or just being able to put things together. And so autistic people can be very innovative if they are able to go through that creation process in the way that their brain works. But what would happen is you'd go see a business advisor and they'd, what's your business idea? And it's top down sort of stuff, which is not how autistic people. So I'm developing a program for business advisors so that they can support autistic ways of thinking and knowing with regards to business innovation. So I think I'm starting there is the place I'm starting, but I would like to have some influence with regards to education, but I think, from the work that I've done over the years, it's very much about doing something small, proving it, and then having something to take out and say, look at that, this is what happened, rather than, getting on a soapbox and saying, well, you need to all change because you're not getting it. You know what I mean? So I think that's probably the start. And I do write for academic journals. So I've been asked to contribute a book chapter on autistic innovation and entrepreneurship, and I'm starting to do a bit of speaking at conferences on that. So I think that's the area, because it's something very personal to me. Like I do innovate all the time, and I do use an autistic way of innovating.
Yeah, well, that's what I wanted to touch on in and around autism, because, disability is so vast, right? When you got physical intellectual, cognitive, psychosocial. So much going on. What disabilities are visible? What aren't? And when you're looking at autism, like that's an invisible disability, and just a stigma around that when it's got to do with invisible disabilities in general. So is it like purely when you're looking at your lived experience, that's when you look at why you're honing in on autism, whether it's you're looking at internally what's going on, but is it also looking out to the broader community, like other people that you've been involved with that are on the spectrum as well?
Yeah, so I'm very. We've had a couple of events in the last 12 months where autistic entrepreneurs have come together, and so we had an event in Melbourne earlier this year for Autistic Pride Day, which Just Gold facilitated over in Melbourne, and so it was a whole day of like seminars and that sort of thing. So that was great, bringing the community together.
And what's the date? What's the date for?
Oh, you know what? I can't remember off the top of my head. I flew in from London the day before, so it was all a bit of a blur.
Oh, what month is it? What month is it in?
It was a couple of months ago. I think it might have been July. I think I'm going to have to Google. We're going to have to.
It's all good.
Have to Google.
At least people know there's a day for it, and it's around that time
Oh
of year.
yeah, and it is Autistic Pride Day. So the difference about that day compared to a lot of the other days around when autism fits in is it is about the autistic community itself. I would say an area which is broader than autism that I'm interested in is design justice. Like it's something that I'm really interested in now with regards to everything in the world is designed for this average white bloke. So everything like, from this able average white bloke who must be walking around there somewhere, and everything in the world's designed for that imaginary person. And so, there's like around 10 design justice principles with regards to looking at, how services are designed, how products are designed. And so that's an area which is broader than the autistic community that I am interested in, is the fact that we've got to really start thinking. I am very focused on autism because that's what I live with every day, but I'm also, that is kind of like, made me think about the injustice of us having to fit into a world where we don't fit in. And it's not even recognised that there is people that are not fitting into everything that's made in this world, sort of stuff. And to just bring that, to highlight that there's, there is something amiss here when we actually don't recognise that everyone's not going to be able to be included with that new product or that new service. So that's something that I'm more broadly interested in.
Yeah, and there's a different facet of justice too, like when I'm thinking about it, when you're talking about individuals that are incarcerated in correctional facilities, and when it's just got to do with the understanding of, like, I get involved with a bit of that, and, where we've got clients that have come out of incarceration facilities and back in the community and that are on the spectrum on various levels, but it's the system just does not understand when you're talking about if you're talking about prison officers, if you're talking about people that work within that system. I think there needs to be more education of understanding people with disabilities, because it's so hard for people, with invisible disabilities. And, and then if you've got other facets of that also, if you've got, yes, that's disability, and then you've got, if it's cultural factors, and you've got Aboriginality on top or other cultural groups, and then it's multi-layered, and just getting individuals to understand that. And, and that's in a pretty harsh environment when you're talking about, you're not just dealing with, the staff that work in these incarceration facilities, it's also the other prisoners. and some people have some pretty short tempers, and we probably don't need to go into detail with some of that, but stuff can get pretty dark real quick inside when people don't understand, and that's whether it's the prisoners themselves, the inmates, or the individuals that are working in there and end up throwing someone in as solitary confinement because purely the system doesn't get it. They don't understand. Hey, there's a lot of people that do, and there's people that do put their hand up when they don't understand and they're willing to learn, but there's a big chunk of that system that still needs a lot of catching up.
Yeah, I mean, I find it also scary because the fact is controlling my environment as an autistic person is really important to me. And as I'm getting older, I'm starting to think about, oh my gosh, imagine going into an aged care facility as an autistic person. You know what I mean? I'd have to lock myself in my room like this. There's no way in the world I'd be able to. So it's something that's really on my mind. So I couldn't even imagine what it would be like for an autistic person to be incarcerated with regards to them not having control over their environment and their sensory needs. It would just be horrific. So I've been starting to think about what I'm going to do in my old age. So I think I'm going to have to die at home, and I've been talking to the kids about putting a rubber flooring so that when I fall, I can just bounce, sort of stuff. Go through the house because I just can't see myself going into a nursing home or something. I just wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Hey, because you're spot on. Because if you look at sensory situations, and if you're on a particular wing of the ward of that aged care facility, and you've got people that are so far gone with dementia, and they might be on a loop and yelling out and screaming, and and then that's doesn't create a good environment with people that do have disability or don't, but it's always hard to, control environments like that, and every facility is different. But yeah, that's good food for thought, I think, for a lot of the sector out there when it's got to do with aged care facilities, because I bet you there's a boatload of people out there that are on the spectrum that are sitting in these facilities and thinking, oh, what am I doing here? Or how can I make this environment suit me better, because the environment feels like it's attacking me,
Yeah, I've got a bird that comes near my house, and it's on a death wish because I can't even handle the tweet, not what sort of stuff. So I'll have to get one of those BB guns for this bird, because it's like I'm having to constantly put in like noise cancelling headphones because there's one damn bird. So I don't know how I'd go. So it could be quite disastrous, really. So it would just wreck your life, like. Have anything that was because it just stops the whole thinking process, just something really tiny can be so disruptive to your thought process. So I don't know how that's going to work. The research is only starting to come out really with regards to seniors and aging and autism. It's been quite interesting looking at the literature, because a study came out last year. The average life expectancy for an autistic person is 39.
Wow, that is young.
Yeah, and 7 times more likely to for suicide. And what was the other interesting one? With the research coming out about aging, that they refer to autistic seniors as anyone over 45. And I thought it was kind of amusing, because I thought that's probably because people who are autistic, the life expectancy is so low. So we're seniors at 45. So I don't know what I am, but I must be on death's door.
What? So you can be so then if you're on the spectrum, you can get on the pension by the age of 48, 50, or what?
That would be interesting to walk into the door with the research paper and just query that.
That's awesome. But hey, so back into the realm of study, University of Wollongong, Master of Autism.
Yeah.
What, like, that's really intriguing. That, like, as a study unit, Master of Autism. So, and after we have a quick chat about that, I want to dive into the various levels of autism and explain into, if that's all right, to listeners and viewers, the various levels and what they are, what they represent. And so it's as much as you can, given that clear cut sort of image, because it's always really tricky for individuals to understand. But yeah, Master of Autism. So how'd that course go, and what happens? What do you learn in that, and what do you get out of that for yourself that you can bring back out into the world?
Well, when I only went through the official diagnosis process last year, I reckon it was. Yeah, last year, March last year, and it was because I am level 2, and so it was like a automatic NDIS. Sent the letter in like straight away, sort of thing.
So you are an NDIS participant, yeah?
I'm an NDIS participant.
Good on you.
So that letter went straight in, you know, with regard to
welcome to the club.
Yeah, that's right. What a horrid process that was, though, may I say? Like, it was so deficit based that I did have issues with it, and I'm prepared now. Wait till they renew my plan. Have I got things to say? That sort of stuff, because it came as a shock. It was kind of like this whirlwind of, you know, all this diagnosis, NDIS, sat down to, you know, develop the plan, and I'm thinking, you know, like it was a really deficit-based focus. Anyway, I'm going to get off track with that. Autism, the master.
We'll come back to that though.
Yeah.
Master of Autism.
Master of Autism. What happened was when I got my plan, they put all this funding in for psychology, because, and I can understand the thinking was that I'm in my 60s. There's a lot to unpack back there with regards to how life has been to get to where I am now, with regards to, you know, the whole leaving school and the difficulty with employment and difficulty with relationships and all that sort of stuff, a lot to unpack. And as waiting on the waiting list for the psychologist, I kind of thought to myself, well, I don't really understand autism and I don't want someone poking around inside my head for something that I'm not understanding and just being led into this process by someone else's opinion with regards to what autism is. So I thought, I'm going to go back and do a Master's of Autism, so that the fact is I knew what was happening before I was having these conversations with people with regards to, you know, what my needs were and what I wanted and all the rest of it. And I think it was it's very heavily subsidised, like the Masters, for everyone in autism.
That's good.
But it's not something that you could get support with the NDIS, because it's education sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But I had saved the government thousands and thousands of dollars because I only did a few sessions with the psychologist, and we both agreed I didn't really need the psychology because, you know, as soon as I could process what was actually happening, I had a frame of understanding everything myself, sort of stuff. So I didn't need to go unpack all that. I get that. I was autistic, you know. It's just like, how much do you have to unpack? You know, that's underpinning all of that. And there was nothing that I needed to go back and dwell on. I had too much going forward that I had to focus on rather than going back into it. And so, I had a few psychology sessions, but we were spending the time talking about the latest journal articles that were coming out, that sort of stuff, sort of thing. So we mutually agreed that that was not a good use of taxpayers' money. So that was the reason I went back, is I wanted to get a hit of the knowledge really quickly so that I could take control of my journey with therapists, really. So that was like behind it. Doing it, I think I found some of the study material to be very deficit based. You know what I mean? I've had to suck it up, sort of thing, with regards to pathologizing what's wrong with me, you know what I mean, sort of thing, and a lot on assessing what's wrong with you and fixing you and all this sort of stuff. So that's been really difficult. I think
really hard internalising all this stuff, and looking within inside yourself and trying to, especially if you've got, because it's daunting sometimes if you're talking to therapists and they're throwing X, Y, and Z at you, and you're like, oh, am I really this or am I really that?
Well, I think the most amazing thing I found is, because having to read journal articles and what I found is I can pick something up and I can tell straight away if the academic is actually autistic themselves. And so there is this, like, you could split the literature and the journal articles between the people studying the autistic people and the people who are like, this is what's happening and this is what, all that sort of stuff. And you can really get that, oh, yeah, that's it. So it's opened up. The best thing I've got out of this is having my head in the literature and kind of like finding my tribe with this understanding of so there's this area of cognition with regards to how autistic people are thinking, and there's this, we've got all these deficits with regards to and then there's this other world which is, hey, we're bottom up and we're associative and all of that, which is really the understanding of how you think and you can do something with, is all coming from autistic researchers, autistic autism researchers. So that's a passion for me now. And if I hadn't gone back and done the masters, I wouldn't have realised that. And so there's this community of amazing autism researchers who are, this is how we think, this is, and so it's a whole new way. And that's the world, and that's the knowledge that I'm just sucking up with regards to how do we develop programs for autistic people so that they can engage in education and employment in a neurodiverse, affirming way, rather than all the deficit stuff is like, oh, I've got to read it to do the assignments, but like I get nothing out of it, and it's awful. It's so really awful.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, and I'll just let you know now what this is. It's not a vape, it's a Camelback. It's got water. I've got a 4-litre pack of water on my back, so people spin out, and I'm like, no, it's not a vape. I hate that stuff personally, but, it's just water.
Yeah, cool.
Just to let you know. Okay, because some people trip out. They're like, what is that? Okay. Yeah, so that's awesome, that you've gone and done your masters in autism, and where that's putting you on the front foot when you're talking to different therapists and getting an understanding of what's going on within yourself, but also where that's applying the knowledge base of where it's helping other individuals. Hey.
Yeah, it's been really worthwhile. It has been so worthwhile because I know where I fit. It would have been awful to have been fed a whole lot of, deficit stuff and been taken in and not having control of, not having all of the body of knowledge and being fed part of the body of knowledge. It would be awful. No wonder. I was about to say, no wonder what the suicide rate's so high. Like if you're just thinking about the negative parts of this, And that is a therapist's job. You know what I mean? It's not a therapist's job to tell you how great you are, sort of thing. And so
Yeah, that's a performance coach. Yeah.
so just so thankful. I reckon I signed up for the masters within 2 weeks of my diagnosis. So I
Yeah,
had
right.
so I had no time to get into all the negative stuff.
That's so awesome. So now you've got the masters under your belt, and
I've
you
got
know
this
you.
semester, I've got this
And,
semester to go.
and let me just state this too: you already got a masters, right? You're a person living and breathing this, so you already had it. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah. So what are the tip? If it's the certain levels, if we can explain to the listeners and viewers the certain levels of autism spectrum, some of the traits. So if we can go from how many levels there are, starting from one end to the other,
Yeah.
and typically what that person, how they function, and everything around that within each level, if that's okay, Sharon.
Yeah, and I guess it's really hard because I don't think the levels capture what it's like to be an autistic person because you're going for your diagnosis and they're picking 1 to 3. Where do you sit on this? And it was very easy for them to put me in at level 2 because of my lifestyle, and so it was very easy to say. It was, the fact is I live on my own. I love being on my own. I've never been lonely in my life. I prefer not to leave the house at all. I spend most of my time with noise cancelling headphones on because I can't even handle the bird outside. um, like just my whole lifestyle just reeks of an autistic person that's not participating in the world, sort of stuff. And there was no real need to have to talk to anyone else. It was just like, the fact of not getting into not understanding the whole school situation as a kid when I started high school, because I socially I didn't fit in. They had a desk for me outside the principal's office, and I did all my schoolwork on a desk outside the principal's office, and I had lunch and recess different than all the kids in the rest of the school for my last year there, sort of stuff. So it didn't take long for them to work out that, wow, she might not quite fit in socially, like with regards to having my own assessment. But I think for other people that are out there in the world, functioning in the world, it would be probably more difficult for them to come in as a level 2 than it was for me, because their life was kind of like saying, oh, you're out there and you're doing that, but they're not seeing what happens when that person comes through the door and crashes every night. So I think I did 10 years of my life where I was out there and working, 5 2-year contracts, which were, yeah, I just managed, never renewed, may I say. But like I did 10 years of working out there in the world, um, and the toll that took on me physically, like coming in and just having to recoup every weekend. There'd be a lot of people that would be sitting at the level 1, not really eligible for NDIS unless they fought for it. But I wouldn't say their lives are that great because they would be suffering. So I have trouble with the levels. I do have trouble with the levels because there's a whole lot of judgment calls with regards to people have good days and bad days. Like, if there's something that I'm passionate about, I will go into the city and do it, and there's no stopping me. You know what I mean, sort of thing. But like, if I'm not, it takes. I'm passion driven to go out into the world, and I do it really well. And I will be, I'll be very vocal if I'm very passionate about something. And I'll get on a plane and I'll go to London and I'll speak at an international conference, no problem at all. But going down to shops and stuff like that, the sensory stuff is huge. I reckon one of the funny ones I had was I went into town because I needed to get a small Christmas tree to put on the because my Christmas tree was like 20 odd years old. So last Christmas I thought, oh, I'm going to the city, and I was looking for this little Christmas tree. And it was all going. And David Jones is a shop I never go into because I think it's like the lights and the mirrors together, sort of stuff. Like
Just overload sensory.
Yeah, overload sensory. And I thought, I'm doing okay because it was a Friday night, I'm doing all right. I'm going to go into David Jones because I couldn't find this Christmas tree. So I thought, I can do this. It was downstairs, was their Christmas department. I got in there and it's like I have trouble with white floors as well. And the floors started moving. And it's like peak Christmas shopping, Christmas department, loads of people in there. The floor starts moving on me, so I'm having to balance myself and I was nearly at the stage of having to get onto all fours to crawl out of David Jones because for me, sensory wise, the whole damn thing was moving. So it's, you have good days and you have bad days and you'll force yourself to do things because you want them so bad. And I think because of my situation, like when I had my diagnosis, they said, you set up the perfect life for an autistic person, which I have. I love my life. But some other people haven't had that opportunity to set up that perfect life as an autistic person. And because of what they're participating in, may seem that they're more highly functioning in the old terms than what they actually are because people aren't seeing the crash when they come home at night. So I do have trouble with the levels. I'm very fortunate that I've come in at level 2 and it was so easy because of the fact of my lifestyle. So the levels are really hard for people who are autistic.
So if you're going to look at, so you're level 2, so if you're going to go level 3, typically when people are that level, can you explain that? Just so, because that's, when you're looking at levels, that's, when you're looking at across the nation and when you're looking at the NDIS and the way things are structured and worded. So what is typically someone that's on the 3rd level? How do they function when it's got to do, if it's non-verbal, if it's got to do with, if they are verbal but they function on a different level and only say certain words, like what? So you take us through that. What is, to you, that level, what does that represent?
To me, it represents a person, a therapist with power making a decision about what level they're putting someone into a box in. And so if you were non-verbal and you went and saw a therapist and they thought non-verbal, you've got all these barriers in your life, you need all this support. But another therapist could be saying, well, that's just, you need to communicate. You're communicating differently, and but but that isn't, that's society's barrier. That's not your barrier. So there's a big judgment call on all of this with regards to where you fit in. I would say support needs for someone who's non-verbal could be seen as level 3, but that's mainly because society, their support needs are there. It's not saying anything about their function. They're about them being high or low functioning. It could be just that their support needs are high because the world expects verbal communication. And I think for me, I think that's the difference between the levels and the high-low functioning part. It's not so much, it's about what are your support needs, really, because of how society has set up the game plan with regards to how you're going to fit into the world. There is this. When you look at autism, because I can't remember what it was. I was looking at it last night. Like there's such a high percentage of the primary disability on the NDIS being autism, but
it's massive.
It is massive. But the thing is, like with autism, there's a lot of co-occurring conditions. So there's a high percentage of people that have intellectual disability as well as autism. So if the autism is going down as their primary disability, There could be other things as well that brings them into the high support needs. So this is just, there's a high percentage of autistic people like myself who are ADHD. There's compulsive behaviours. There's just so many. There's like a list of like co-occurring conditions and how much higher the rate of those co-occurring conditions happening if you're autistic. So I think that has a lot to do with the levels as well, because it's not about high and low functioning autism. It's really about your support needs. And so for myself, my support needs are the fact that I have I do. I mean, I am on ADHD meds now, which has been a life-changing thing for me. Like just an amazing life-changing. It was just crazy. Like I didn't know what life would be like with the meds. So I'd just gone through 60 odd years without the meds, and all of a sudden I take these meds, and it's like somebody being blind or deaf, and all of a sudden being given that sense. That's what it was like. It was just crazy. Like the first tablet, it was just the most amazing experience. It was mind blowing. But I have trouble, and I had like white carpet on the floor, and I couldn't project manage how I would get furniture out of the house and put, so the executive step by step stuff I have difficulty with, because I'm slow processing of information. Anything on the phone where I'm having to deal with someone and like speak back to them, and like that sort of stuff, so there's lots of things I have difficulty with on a day-to-day basis, which would be my support needs. Learning new computer programs, those sorts of things I have difficulty with. Anything where I've got to follow that step-by-step instruction is difficult for me. So levels, support needs, nothing to do with functioning, I reckon. It's more to do with what you need support for in your to have a good life.
And there could probably be some, what do you think, when you got to do with the diagnostic tools that they have for autism, there could be other components that may benefit individuals, yeah?
Yeah, so the diagnostic tool for autism, what do I think of that? I mean, it's been set up for that, able white bloke sort of stuff. So
Yeah.
you're getting judged against that.
Yeah, it's like me being a quad, and when it's got to do with wheelchair access, everything's bloody on manual chairs, and I'm in this big electric chair. It's like, come on.
Yeah, that's right. So I think we're going to get better. I mean, I just know what it's like, as a female with a disability that it's got a history of it being a male disability, and all of a sudden you're a female and you're fitting into this perception of what it's like, and what are the characteristics. And so females are very good at masking that they're autistic, so that people don't realise, compared to men. I've got no understanding of the cultural part of this. So to look at the intersectionality with regards to this and culture, that would be really interesting, and how much support there is for that.
Yes, that was what I was going to ask you. The intersectionality, spot on. Like if you've had any involvement with mob, like whether that's First Nations or if it's different coal groups, when it's got to do with different nationalities around the country, if you've talked to individuals or just from what you've seen or interactions, and just, it's interesting, and just seeing how different nationalities or First Nations groups, how they accept mob, their own people with disability, whether that's autism or other invisible and physical disabilities,
I haven't gone into it at all. I mean, it's an area of interest. I think I just haven't had the time to actually have a look. But just even looking on the map of the world, and what countries have what percentage of the population of autistic people, and then looking at the Middle East and such the high numbers of diagnosis of autistic people, and wondering, when you look across the world and see, some countries, and it's probably because it's not being recognised, and then there's these other countries which are like really high, and you just there's this could keep me googling for years, should I say, with regards to working out what it is. Um, I can't even imagine what it would be like with regards to cultural expectations of autistic people in different cultures. I think it would be. I think there would be, just the diversity from. Maori in New Zealand. I wish you could Google that, because they've got a term for autistic people. That there's a Maori word, and it's about, I can't remember what it is, and I can't remember what the definition is, but it gave me a feeling of doing their own thing, sort of stuff. It was really nice, you know what I mean, sort of stuff. So I think, culturally, some of it could be really nice, and culturally, some of it could be really bad. But I haven't unpacked that at all.
That's all good. So, yeah, it is interesting. And, I think they do a lot of good work over in NZ when it's got to do with disability in general, which is great.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, and it's cool, like, seeing how and wondering, like, how people that are on the spectrum, perceive the world, when you're looking at, if it's yourself, if you're looking at Albert Einstein, Elon Musk, if you're looking at Hannah Gatsby, and just how they look at things not so linear, like looking at things from different directions, and how that folds into their thoughts, and then how they hone in on how they perceive the world, and how that spills out in the craft that they're lined up with, whether it's physics or if it's comedy like Hannah Gatsby, or you look at Musk and look at the empire that bloke's just amassed, which is insane. So it's very interesting.
It is so interesting, and it's another area of of great interest for me, because the diversity of interests that autistic people have, because we hone in, it's called monotropism, we hone in on these interest areas, and we have these
monotropism,
so it's kind of like we have like these interest areas that we learn lots about. Like we have these, and I've probably got 4 that that I've kind of like collected data sets in my head over. And so for autistic people, they've got these data sets, and the innovation is really emerging from these data sets of knowledge. And I look at all of these autistic people with these crazy data sets in their head, where they think differently because they don't see things in the traditional boxes, and they can pull these things together. And I just wonder why society hasn't gone, maybe we need to be, thinking about how we can support these people to be entrepreneurs. Like with regards to, I watched Grace Tame and her passion for her and her.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, like, my God, and Greta Thunberg, you know what I mean? Like, amazing people that can are so passionate, so knowledgeable about their interest area, and to be able to support them to make the certificate. It's like it's great that people are getting the soapbox to be able to vocalise and to, I guess, to be activists in an area. But to actually be able to support them to institutionalise what they're doing, to create systems change beyond themselves, that's an area I'm super interested in. How do you support autistic people to take their interest areas? Because a lot of the interest areas are about creating change in the world. And so, how do you support these people? Even Musk, who, can seem a little bit on the offside sometimes, his belief system is very much about consciousness. So that's what's like underpinning. That's his data set that he's working from, is about this, this global consciousness sort of stuff. And everything he's doing is he's trying to work out what the meaning of life really is, sort of stuff. So that's really his. So autistic people have these interest areas, and they collect data sets on them, and things emerge, and very creative and innovative with regards to those. And how do we support people? And I think what's crazy is that the IT companies, the finance companies, are very aware of how autistic people see their associative thinking and their ability to see patterns, etc. And so these big IT companies are putting in place these fantastic, accommodating employment opportunities for autistic people. But it's just one field where autistic people's interests is everything from music to arts to, the whole kit and caboodle. But, there's this, the finance companies and the IT companies, or the big IT companies, are recognising the skill base of autistic people and providing those opportunities for it to be accommodating and everything. But what it's doing is, while it's providing employment opportunities, it's pigeonholing autistic people into just having this choice of this, because that's the career it's accommodated. Where it's really got to come across all fields is the recognition of the associative thinking across all fields. So it's not just where the money is and big companies, doing this. And people and employers across all fields have got to be able to create these accommodations and be supported to create these accommodations.
Art, culture, science, sport,
Everything. And also some of the big challenges that the world's, some of our big challenges in society, we need out of the box thinking. Well, that's what we do.
Yeah, that's right. It's thinking on a different plane,
Yeah.
So you got just different views that are not so linear, or, it's being outside the parallel and having all these different angles in there that can help robust discussions or line of thought, or what the bloody meaning of life is, or all of it. And is that where yourself as a doctor comes into it, and where it helps you when it's got to do with philosophy and how autism has a role in that as well?
I think part of it for me, that the going back and deciding to do the PhD, I think, which was around 10 years ago, I finished that. I loved it. I'm really keen to do another PhD sort of stuff. Like I really love the process. And so for me, it was, I delivered a program that was really well received, but I didn't know what the impact on society was of the program. So signing up and getting a scholarship for a PhD was a way for me tracking the participants for 3 years from that program, and doing a study on what actually happened in a way that it was funded. So that's what the PhD actually was. So I'm very pragmatic. When I started the PhD and I had to find an underpinning philosophy for my PhD, I was reading all this stuff, because I'm not a good reader. I'll read 2 sentences and I'll forget what the first sentence was. So I've never read fiction. I've never read a fiction book. I only I drill for information in text. And so I was attempting to read all this philosophy, and it was all these dead white men from 100 and odd years ago. And I'm thinking, like, why am I listening to you guys? It seems like I don't get this. Like, why are we like basing the underpinning of all of this on these dead white people? But then I came, and because I'm so, what is the impact in the world from stuff? I came across pragmatism. which was a whole lot of dead white people, like initially, sort of stuff. But I could understand it. Know what I mean? You'd mix stuff up and use whatever was helpful in solving the problem. Know what I mean? So that kind of like spoke to me. So I didn't go into the PhD with wanting to navel gaze on some philosophy. It was quite the opposite, really. I wanted to have the freedom to just see what was working from an initiative that I'd created, because I didn't want to roll it out if there was anything that was, not cool about it. And so that was the purpose behind the PhD.
Awesome. Solid work. So do you think people on the spectrum in general, if we're talking about being politically correct, autism on the spectrum, neurodiversity. So
Yes.
is it okay to throw it all in the mix, or does one outweigh the other?
So, and I mean, it's very much a matter of choice, individual choice. The neurodiversity is, we're all neurodiverse. Everybody on the earth is neurodiverse. It's neurodivergent, and that is very much that white able man I was talking about. So we're divergent from that. Know what I mean? Sort of stuff. So we're not that. So you think of
all these white fellas have got to settle down. Jesus.
So we're not that average person, and so we're divergent from that average brain type. And so autistic people are one of those divergent classifications from a normal brain type. I guess the controversy for many years, which I think is being settled a bit now because we're getting the National Autism Strategy, South Australian Autism Strategy, and some of that was hard to read in the early days of publications coming out from the government. Because of, I guess, the big dividing line is whether it's people with autism or autistic person. So that's the controversies sort of stuff. And like reading through some of the early government papers with regards to looking at autism strategies, it was, people with autism, but they've changed their language now to, autistic person, sort of thing, or autistic individual, autistic people, which it's not a thing you've got, sort of stuff. It's more of part of your identity, as in it's everything about me. It's there since birth, like it's not going anywhere. So
bloody cure for it. There's no magic pill.
No,
There's no weird sort of bone broth that you give your kids to bloody cure them. It just doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah, and it is part of who I am and how I think and how I operate in the world, and so it's part of my identity. I'm not a person with that. It is part of me. So that's been probably the most controversial part, and probably the part that I've been a bit. But not all autistic people feel that way. And so, and I think there's been a change over the years too, where there is more autistic people having a voice, where I think it was the parents of autistic children that had a stronger voice for many, many years, and great work they did, may I say. They went from that being blamed, mothers being blamed for actually having to do the hard advocacy yards to say, hold on a sec, like there's something going on here and it ain't nothing to do with me not showing any love, sort of stuff. So they did the hard yards, but I think in more recent years we've seen autistic adults in their own right having the voice more than parents having the voice.
Yeah, for sure. And perpetuating that voice, like when it's got to do with support. So do you think the National Disability Insurance Scheme, the NDIS, do you think people on the spectrum, people neurodiverse or autistic people, are getting the benefits from being participants on the scheme itself?
I think I am. Personally, I can speak for myself. I mean, I am getting benefits. I could see where the waste is. And it's not so much the waste, like the fact of my going back to university and doing a Master of Autism has probably saved the taxpayer 20 grand, because I haven't had to go through this long, slow process of understanding autism. Know what I mean? I just got just got info dumped with regards to what autism was, right, really quickly. I've just recently had some support from Job Access with regards to
How good is Job Access? So
Job
good.
Access is phenomenal, but
A
the
lot of
one
people
bit
don't
that
know about it.
I know they're about to do an article on me
Good.
with regards to home-based business and autism. I was pissed off in the process, not from the Job Access folk, but I went to purchase. I got approved for a desk and a chair, and I went to purchase the desk. And when I went back to the provider of the desk and said I need an invoice because government funding, they put the price up $1,000 on the desk.
That makes me sick.
I was just horrified.
I hate that. Anything, as soon as there's a disability tag on it or health, let's jack the price up. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. Excuse the French, but that drives me nuts.
No, and the thing is, what was the greatest part about the Job Access was having the occupational therapist in my home to go over. I was getting injuries, and to go over like what I needed, and I needed, I used the top of the desk to get up, sort of stuff, and I need two motors in the so there was things I needed in the desk. But then looking at the prices of it, it was just ridiculous. And then I looked at Amazon, and where they were wanting $3,200 for this desk, because I knew the features. I looked on Amazon. I could get a desk in the colour I liked with the two motors, all the rest of it, which was the features I needed, for $666. So I went up. I was in a position where I could financially pay for that desk myself and not have the government pay for it, because I just could not justify paying that kind of dough for a desk and having the taxpayer pay for it.
It's a big markup, hey?
It's a big markup, know what I mean? And it was like, no, I'll just pay for this myself, know what I mean? Sort of stuff. So, I think there's there's definitely some issues out there I think there's some saving of money that can be done, and I'm not prepared to, I am going to be giving a lot of my plan money back, because the fact is, if it's, I haven't got the time for all the therapy. I'm too busy working to have all the therapy.
Yeah, I get it. I'm guilty of that too. And I know I've got it when it's got to do with physio and other stuff. Because I'm, for work, I own and run an NDIS service provision company, and work in other disability schemes in other states and territories, but we're putting a lot in, looking after a lot of other people out there, with disability that have got autism and other disabilities, whether that's physical or invisible. But it's like sometimes it's like, Jake, take a back seat just for a minute so you can fit a physio session in, talk to your OT, get yourself sorted out so you can keep bloody functioning in the world.
I know. And
it's just work. And
I don't think people really understand the physical part of autism. So it's a case of I haven't got the body awareness. And these days they pick that up with the kids. So the kids are doing a lot of OT stuff in early years. But for the generations that's come through without that, I'll go to a doctor and I'll say I've got pain, and they'll say where, and I say I don't know.
Don't know.
I've got no idea. It could be anywhere over my body,
No, I don't have the fine motor skills to do certain things. I study years. This is years ago. It was on Catalyst. It was on the ABC in and around science and people with autism, and where they had X amount of people that were on the spectrum, and just looking at how they would generally walk on a straight line, and how people on certain levels would walk the same. And that was really interesting. Like, it was only a small study, but it was just interesting to see that they'd pick up on that the physical nature on how people on the spectrum would walk. You know, just little things like when it's got to do with our body mechanics and stuff.
Yeah, so I don't. I've got no. I've got like I don't know hunger. I don't know thirst. I know thirst when I'm about to pass out because I haven't drank anything for a few days. But I've got none of that internal body feeling stuff happening, and I don't know my place in a space, so I bang into things quite easily. And so as I'm getting older, like where that used to kind of be funny as you're younger, but as you're getting older, the injury stuff, and because I'd say my biggest issue is that if I'm in a flow state with work, I can do 18 hours at a desk, no problem. You know what I mean? Sort of stuff. 7 days a week. If I'm into something, I'm into it big time. Like, yeah. And so the injuries from that are quite, especially as you're getting older. So the stopping work I have an issue with, which is something I've got to get under control. Like
It's good but bad. But hey, if you're in that flow state, you're pumping out that solid work.
I know.
And then you're thinking, if that breaks, are you ever going to be able to get that back of the role that you're on if it's focusing on a particular subject or whatever it is,
Yeah, so I'm really lucky that I've got a co-founder with Wicked Lab, and she understands how I need to work. So I'm really lucky because if I'm in a flow state and I'm interrupted for something, it can take me quite a few hours to get back into something, sort of stuff. So the breaking of the flow state is really quite, it can be, and it feels awful too. It feels physically awful to break that flow. So understanding that, and that's why I've always said that entrepreneurship is really good for autistic people. But going back to the IT companies and the finance companies, they're recognising that, and they are making the accommodations. And even I'm not bagging them. I'm not bagging them. I'm just wanting the diversity of employment options for autistic people. And it's just that those big, the big Microsofts and IBMs and the SAP, that they've kind of like worked out the game plan with regards to autistic people. And making these accommodations, which is great, but
hopefully they're all getting paid accordingly too. Obviously, they're using these individuals for their intellect and how they can advance these massive corporations, but it should be going a two-way street here.
Yeah, and I haven't delved into, whether they're getting any subsidies or anything like that at all. So I haven't delved into. So that's a really good point. But I just know that for me, my well-being and my quality of life is so tied up to me being able to spend a lot of my waking hours in a flow state in my interest areas, and to be pushed into an employment situation that was outside of my interest area because that was the only employment option that was going to accommodate me because of my disability, that would have an impact on my well-being because it's not where my head wants to be. I'm pulling against that. I've got to go to work each day and pull against where my head wants to be. And so, the more we can actually create the diversity of opportunities for people with autism is really important.
100%. So, if you were going to have a sit down with the architect of the National Disability Insurance Scheme, the NDIS, the mighty Bruce Bonyhady, and if you were going to talk to him about what he could do better, or if it was giving him some insight into people on the spectrum of various levels and how the whole scheme can operate on a better playing field for these individuals. And just picture you sitting around a campfire, you have either you're having a whiskey or a water or whatever, you're just straight shooting with him, what would you fire at Mr. Bonyhady?
I would say the key for education and employment for autistic individuals is to start with their interest areas. It's so much of, what underpins the diagnosis is, we think differently, and really start with, instead of trying to make autistic people fit into what is the norm with regards to employment and education, wrap the education and employment around what is natural for autistic people, so that, it's not something that's so foreign to how we operate. It's like, I'm here using a Mac and they're over there with, I'm on a different operating system and I'm trying to...
I don't know, Windows.
Yeah, it's like that. It's like that with everything. And I think because I'm getting older, my patience level with regards to why do I have to spend a couple of hours trying to put into how my brain will take things in, the education and the employment. It's like, let's wrap that around the natural ways of how autistic people operate. When you think of autistic unemployment, it's 3 times that of the general disability, for Christ's sake. It's huge. The life expectancy, and they reckon the suicide rate being 7 times that of the general population is because autistic people are having to operate all the time in a way that's so foreign to how they're naturally programmed. So why is there so much therapy for us to fit in? Why can't we just look at, okay, well, how do autistic people think and how do autistic people learn? And why can't we develop education programs and employment opportunities around that? Seems very basic to me.
See, did you hear that? Chairman of the board, Kurt Fernley, Bruce Bonyhady, Minister Shorten. Take it on board, people. Righto. And that was great. And looking at the broader community, I reckon there's so many people undiagnosed out there, kids and adults on various levels.
Yeah. And I think that's part of it too. Like you have a child and you take them in for an autism diagnosis and you'll sit through that process and you'll think, oh, that sounds quite familiar with me. Because I guess part of it for me, I've got autistic great nephew and great niece. It's through the family, and we used to put it down. My dad's peculiarities we used to put down to, he landed on the beach at Normandy sort of thing, so couldn't handle any kind of noise at all, and he couldn't do the social bit at all, and they actually said in the report when I had my diagnosis that my father was autistic. So it's through the family. So there's lots of people out there that are undiagnosed because of the fact of that it's just the diagnosis wasn't so accessible for people, and so even now, like the financial part of it,
it's thousands. If you're. That's it. If you're not getting, as a child, getting in with a paediatrician, that can be a 2-year wait, and people are going through school and it's putting a handbrake on their education and their disability support needs, and they got, their level 2 autism, and you can see it, but it's not diagnosed, and you got parents or communities where, they can't pull out thousands of dollars for these clinicians to diagnose it. So what do we do?
Yeah, and the thing is, I wasn't prepared to spend that kind of money until I had that kind of money. You know what I mean? Like, I had house to pay off and I had things to do. So you
See,
just
and
don't.
you're in a position to do that. And there's
Yeah,
thousands, who knows,
yeah.
millions that don't have the dollars and cents to do that.
And then the thing is, like, if someone had a drug issue and they were in prison, they would probably get some kind of therapy for that. Why aren't they going through the prisons and asking people if they would like to have assessments for neurodiversity? That would do a lot more to handle recidivism than anything else that they could bloody do.
I'm knocking the nail on the head right there. Bang.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
I
Hey?
know, like I know, like
Mm-hmm.
the percentage in prisons is huge. So why aren't they? Because getting back to the meds, when I went on the ADHD meds, like that first pill within like half hour, I never noticed that everything in my life, everything from turning on the coffee machine to everything, there was a gap between the thought process of me wanting to do something and me actually being able to do it. It was only probably it was probably only a second or something, but there was this gap. And all of a sudden, one pill and the gap's gone. 60 odd years of this being this gap between me
Wow.
thinking I wanted to do something and that actually being able to physically do it for 60 odd years and one pill and it was totally gone. That gap was gone. I could actually think something and do it, like automatically.
God, it's like in the Matrix, red, blue, red pill, blue pill, bang, inserted in. It's like, oh, now here we go.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy. I
No,
got
but
fidgety.
that's awesome for yourself, though. Yeah, where that's showing a different aspect to yourself and who you are and where you are on this earth as a person with disability, with autism, like super important. And it's just full on, and when you go back to what diagnosis used to be, when it used to be schizophrenia based like that, which is insane. And then you're getting people that have got, if it's the shame factor, not if they're not wanting to go to specialists or doctors, or if they don't have the money, or and they keep got that internal struggle, and then that's when bloody suicide and everything else starts creeping in, or daunting thoughts like, why do I feel this way? Why do I operate like this? When I look at other people, why are they like that and I'm not? When people start questioning themselves, it's full on.
I'm very lucky that I've had none of that because of the fact of I left the education. I didn't really engage in the education system to start with as a kid. Left very early. Was on welfare for 15 to 16 years, so I could operate without anyone trying to make me be something that I wasn't. Even and when I did start work for that 10 years, I didn't behave. I was the world's worst employee. I was doing my own thing even then, and then self-employed throughout. So I haven't conformed in any way. But the amount of people that approach me who are quite successful and say I'm autistic, but I haven't let anyone at work know,
Mm.
because of that shame factor and because of that and the struggles they have in life and their inability to really be themselves. It's not nice. You know what I mean? We've got to recognise that there is nothing wrong with autistic people. We think differently. That's all there is. We think differently. There's a whole lot of other things that autistic people could have on the side, like the ADHD and the intellectual disability and all the rest of it. That's not autism. That's a co-occurring condition. But autism itself, there's nothing wrong with it. We think differently, and so let the world make things so that match our way of thinking. There's great benefits of being autistic, and the world's got to recognise that. It's got to harness that. It's got to support that way of thinking, and we can help solve heaps of the world's problems.
Yes. And in doing that, harnessing that energy. So the center for Autistic Social Entrepreneurship. Talk to us about that, and how does one apply? Do they get invited? Like, what's the whole system going on with this entrepreneurship and what's been developed there?
So it's quite crazy in that it's got nothing to do with autistic entrepreneur people being involved at all. It's to do with the systems that would support autistic entrepreneurs. So it's about the crazy thing when I went on the NDIS was they were saying, oh, you need support workers, during the daytime you need to go out for a coffee and all this. And I'm saying, I'm working. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to go for a coffee and sit in a coffee shop with all those sensory issues. Like, I'm at work. I'm working. Like, why would I do that? So it was like I was talking to this alien from another planet that just wasn't getting it at all. And so the reality with regards to autistic people is the service providers need to understand people who are self-employed, need to understand autistic ways of thinking. They need to recognise that we're going to be dealing with this whole other service system, which is about supporting entrepreneurship. And those two to support people need to be talking to each other so that the business advisors are providing the autistic person with what they're doing, and they can take that to the local area coordinator for their plan, and this is what I've been working on and this is what I need support with. So the Centre for Autistic Entrepreneurship is more about getting that seamless service support stuff for autistic entrepreneurs, and also training business advisors in how autistic individuals think, innovate, and how we actually do entrepreneurship, so that when they're giving advice to an autistic entrepreneur, they're not trying to the autistic entrepreneur is not trying to retrofit everything into a different way of how they innovate.
Can be the other way around, yeah?
Yeah, the other way around. It's up to the business advisor to understand, okay, they've got this, it isn't a case of, I've got this business idea, how do I do this plan? It's that I've got this body of knowledge, I've got this data set, and this opportunity is emerging from it. Don't tell me what the market opportunity is. When I've started my businesses, I remember my co-founder, she said, what's the market? I said, there is no market. We've got to create the market. This sort of stuff. So if you went in to see a business advisor, they'd say, but there's no market for that. Well, that's just too bad.
Make it.
Yeah, you make the market.
Autistic consultants coming at you.
Yeah. So it's explaining that. So it's getting that understanding of there's a different way of and you look at Albert Einstein and you look at Temple Grandin, who's an amazing entrepreneur, sort of stuff. It's a case of, they haven't come in and gone through with it, but they've had an interest area. And it's from that interest area that their innovations have come. And it's through that and then finding the opportunities that fit that. So it's a different way of creating an innovation, and it's a different approach to entrepreneurship as well. And so the Centre for Autistic Entrepreneurship is not so much about, I've got a passion for autistic people being able to innovate and being able to have economic self-determination. But until the systems are set up with regards to the disability services and the enterprise support is set up, and business advisors understand autism, to run something for autistic social entrepreneurs, I would be setting them up for failure, or I would be segregating them from the mainstream, because currently the mainstream isn't supportive. And so the focus of the Centre for Autistic Social Entrepreneurship is making a change to that support system for autistic social entrepreneurs.
That's great. Impressive. So does that float into the work that you do with Wicked Labs? And if you want to explain what goes on there, because I've looked into what that is and the whole systems and networks and tools, and is that getting people that, maybe from that centre, and if it's getting people into that to help develop some of the tools that are in Wicked Labs, and how does Wicked Labs work? Talk Talk us through it, yeah?
Yeah, so with Wicked Lab, it's about systems change and systems transition, and we've got software tools that can map the transition of a community that's addressing a complex social policy problem in a place. And we've got a complexity science informed course that trains people on this idea of these complex problems being different, as there's all these parts to them, there's interrelations between them, and lots of different people having to come together in a place to transition to a better way of working for that kind of problem. Yesterday, we launched a new lab type which brings together service delivery and that. So the kind of problems we've been working on are things like disaster resilience, greening of cities, food insecurity, but they haven't involved service systems. So while we've been doing this transitioning for these big problems of all of these players, they've been for things which are naturally seeing systems, thinking regenerative, more of a community development kind of flavour to them. Now, all of a sudden, we're coming in and saying, hold on a sec. For something like autistic entrepreneurship, we've got two things happening. We've got to transition the system of players to a new way of working, which is supportive and listens to lived experience. But also at the same time, we've got this more complicated problem of getting the integration of the service delivery. So that's something we're moving into now, is looking at wicked human services type problems, and it really having these two components to it.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth, like if it's going into that human services and service delivery, because, looking at your complex systems that you got within Wicked Labs, because you're looking at, unit 1, understanding wicked problems, the problems within, if it's the NDIS, if you're looking at, tackling wicked problems by building adaptive communities, whether that's adaptive communities service provision or if it's within the agency themselves, understanding that. And also the most important people, the vulnerable people in the community, the participants themselves. And then you've got Unit 3, tackling wicked problems by strengthening the government community interface.
Yeah.
Those synergies are really important. So is that some of the where you're going, yeah?
Yeah, so I would say the difference probably is with regards to the human services stuff is where we've had this focus on adaptive communities to transition all of these people going for the same North Star. With the service delivery stuff, it's more about alignment. So we don't want people with disabilities or people with lived experience being co-opted by service delivery, as in we're all the same. It's more of an alignment of our separate community of interest sort of stuff, like recognising that we're still keeping our own identities and not all coming together as this nice cohesive blancmange stuff, which, is fine if you're doing something like climate change or food insecurity or disaster resilience. This is different. People have got very different ways of practicing and having roles. So it's a landscape of practice more than the cohesion of an ecosystem. And I'd say the other key part is the fact is the recognition of lived experience, to be able to understand what works within the service systems and what doesn't. And the people who understand that the most are people with lived experience. So really having that at the centre of addressing these kind of problems. The people with lived experience in the place, actually at the centre, and recognising their intellectual knowledge, not only of the human service, whether it's a disability, poverty, whatever it is, but it's also their understanding of the service systems as a user.
100%.
Central.
Always the user interface. That's it. The people that receive it, but then how can they flip the switch and get on the other side? And it's seeing like how it should be delivered, but they're working within themselves, and iron sharpens iron there,
Yeah, and at the same time, making sure there's economic self-determination, recognising the value of the skills and the knowledge and supporting their economic self-determination throughout this process is another really key part to this, what we're introducing with this new systemic landscape of practice lab approach. So it's got this focus on lived experience at the centre and also the economic self-determination of the people with the knowledge.
So a bit of that's underway at the moment, yeah?
Yeah, we've actually got a submission in for doing a statewide autism project using this new lab approach. So we're working with a philanthropic organisation in Australia, and fingers crossed it's going to get over the line and we'll actually be able to put that on the ground, which is very exciting. But we set it up so that it would be for any human services type problem. Wicked problem.
That's good. And I'm going to talk to you about some stuff off camera about that, but we'll leave that obviously till later. But hey, that is awesome. I'm loving what you do. That's super important. And, having yourself, your background, your education, and the way that you put it when it's got to do with the landscape, and it's seeing the complexities and how you overcome that, looking at the interface. So first and foremost, the participants, it's all about design from down on the coalface with the vulnerable individuals, and then look at the government interface, and that's just going to tool up the whole scheme itself a lot more and make sure that people are getting the services and supports that they need within their community. Whether, it doesn't matter if they're urban, rural or remote, you're trying to streamline as much as you can.
Yeah, so, and that place is just it's so important, it's the connection to place.
Yeah, and I'll leave it on this one last question, because this stuff, this has only come up. I haven't done too much research, but have you ever seen research when it's got to do with autistic people and how their gut biome, it sort of is balanced in a different way compared to other individuals? Have you seen that when it's got to do with gut bacteria? And
I have seen a little bit of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I have seen it come up. I've also seen some of the research that says it's crap. You know what I mean? Sort of stuff. So I've seen
I see a bit of both. I just wanted to pick your brain on it.
No, I haven't gone there at all. Know what I mean? And I think myself personally, I do have so much issue with regards. I don't know what's happening inside this body at all. Know what I mean? Sort of stuff. It's like, I've got my perception internally and externally is just not there, which is something that is. So I wouldn't know personally what any of that is like, because of the fact is I haven't got that sensitivity to what's happening with inside my body, which is an issue as you're getting older. I'll drop dead of cancer and not even know anything was wrong.
Don't say that.
Oh gosh, I had cancer for 10 years. Never felt a thing. I don't take any pain medication whatsoever. So I don't. Even if I put my back out or anything, there is nothing inside.
It scares me when I've watched, stuff on opioids and the pharmaceutical companies that, especially in the States, but that stuff's scary, So, but that's a good. It sucks that when you saw and do your back out, but if you're avoiding stuff like that and you can sustain.
Yeah. Don't do it all. I've got a little portable TENS machine, and it's just like.
How good are they?
I know, but I don't do painkillers at all. You know what I mean? It wouldn't make any difference. I wouldn't know where the pain was.
Well, Dr. Sharon Zivkovic, I really, really appreciate the time that you took to sit down and have a yarn with me. Is there anything else? Yeah, is there anything else that you wanted to put out in the atmosphere before we roll it up?
Oh, just what an exciting time it is to be an autistic individual in Australia, with the national strategy and the South Australian strategy. People have got to come out as autistic in their own time. They can't. People say to me, "I haven't told anyone," and that's fine, because they've got to do it when it's right for them, because they're in relationships and they're in employment and all the rest of it. But yeah, wow, if the world was more accepting of autistic people and people didn't have to hide it. I feel so sorry for people who are hiding it and just dying every night when they go home from work. So, yeah, just be kinder to people who are different. Is about the only thing I really want to say.
Here. So if people want to get in contact with you, if it's social media or whatever it may be, throw that stuff out in the atmosphere too.
Yeah, so it's LinkedIn. I'm a big LinkedIn person. Even though I understand why for Elon Musk with regards to what is his data set and what he sees as his understanding of the world. I understand that, but I've lost faith in Twitter. So I'm not there anymore, but I'm still on LinkedIn.
Yeah, nice. Well, you know where to find her, where to find the doctor, and if it's all things to do with autism and it's having some robust discussions, and especially if we're looking at, not just the NDIS, if it's other, just getting people education, taking advantage and harnessing people's knowledge that are on the spectrum, very important. Thanks again for coming on for a yarn, and I'm very excited to see what you're going to be doing in the future.
Thank you. Such a pleasure, Jake. It was lovely catching up. Cheers.
Awesome. Solid yarn, eh? With Dr. Sharon Zivkovic, all things autism, fleshing it out, and where it's channeling through to autistic entrepreneurship. Loved it. And if you like the podcast, hit that subscribe or follow button. And we've also got a Patreon page. The link is within the description. So if you want to roll with the squad and become a patron, that'd be great. And if you want to get in contact with me, you can get me via Instagram at streetrollandcheetah or email, one word, streetrollandcheetah@gmail.com. We've got a Facebook page, Keep Rolling with Jake Briggs, so check it out. And if you want to get me via LinkedIn, just Jake Briggs. I want to thank our sponsors, Permaville Australia, the greatest electric wheelchairs in the land. Wouldn't be sitting in anything else but these four wheels right here. And they got great assistive tech also. So righto, see you on the next one.